morning, everybody. I'm Sandra Murphy. I'm a business doctor down here on the Sussex coast in the not so sunny Brighton, sadly, this morning. And for those of you who don't know us, business doctors are a team of around 40 spread across the UK, and we work with business owners and strategic partners to support businesses in achieving their vision. And clearly that's been a really, really interesting and challenging few months. And so what we want to talk to you about today, we've chosen to talk about regeneration because many of the conversations that we've had with our clients and our strategic partners over the last few months have been around almost this idea that we need to go all the way back to basics, and we almost need to look at our businesses as if we are startups all over again, because so many things have changed. But what we want to do today is talk to you about how you can differentiate your business so that you can survive the recession that is undoubtedly coming through to us next. So I'm going to start a screen share, fingers crossed, always dependent on technology. Here we go. So regeneration, opportunity or threat. How do you maximise your opportunities in the new norm? Richard is just going to introduce himself and then we will crack on with the presentation for you.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be with you. I won't repeat what Sandra said, so you've heard what business doctors do, but I'm based down in the southwest, based in Bath. Support businesses in sort of Bath, Bristol area. And obviously, our involvement with businesses over the last few weeks and few months, sort of since the lockdown kicked in, has evolved alongside them as they've been kind of going on that journey themselves as business owners. And I mean, our alliance with Futrli kicked off quite a while ago, and it came about really because we could see how the tools and resources that Futrli had developed fitted really, really well with some of the ways in which we support business owners. Particularly in terms of helping to demystify things for them. So I remember we built some initial dashboards on the Futrli sort of advisor platform for one business owner up in the north, and within a couple of weeks she came back to us and sort of commented that, you know, this had kind of transformed her as a leader within her business, because for the first time she felt really sort of comfortable and confident talking about the numbers and the financial performance of the business. And, you know, when lockdown struck, I think that sort of financial piece really came to the fore for people, because, you know, instantly you were hit with a situation that was unprecedented where as business owners we're having to take stock of, okay, what does this mean for us? And the importance of having that timely, accurate, up-to-date financial information on where the business is at today, to help then with the sort of cash flow planning and the forecasting and scenario planning, which we found ourselves supporting a lot of businesses with in terms of sort of understanding what the cash flow needs were going to be, became really, really important. And having kind of supported businesses through that period, with many of them sort of accessing the government support and the loans and the finance and things like that, and sort of steadying their businesses, our attention now is turning to, okay, how do we support them through the next phase? As businesses are returning to work, how can we support them in terms of getting a plan together, refreshing things, taking stock and planning ahead, and importantly engaging their teams. So what we wanted to do this morning was just a bit of a show and tell really on just some of the sort of resources and frameworks that we're using with businesses, on the basis that for the businesses who are online today, hopefully it gives you a few things to think about and some ideas and things that you can incorporate into your planning as you sort of are regenerating your businesses, but also obviously for the accountants and advisors, hopefully it's something that you can use and, you know, with your own clients. So
can I just add something teeny tiny? I promise we won't be talking that much in this, but I just want to add, I think where our real worry is we've seen a massive, the last few weeks and months has seen people get their cash flow forecast, get an indication of where they are now. And then of course they've got bounce back loans, they've got CBILS. For those that have been successful with CBILS, I know that it's been a relatively slow process, but you know, there's money in the bank. But now as we go into this, which is why this one's so relevant, which is why I wanted, which I was so keen to get this session done, because actually if we don't look at business efficiencies, if we don't identify what to do, the money in the bank will be burnt and the runway will be gone, and there won't be the government bounce backs, there won't be the government loans, and of course the businesses won't be in a state to then go and get funding. And I think there's a core part to play where, you know, sometimes there's a bit of security at the moment where you think, right, okay, we're going to get back to normal, we're starting to open up again, we've got a bit of money in the bank. But I think we haven't yet seen that pinch point. And I want both businesses and accountants to really lift their eyes from this month and look 6 months down the line and think, actually, how am I going to make this runway last? How am I truly going to differentiate myself? And that's what I really, really want everybody to get out of this session today and really focus on. It genuinely isn't a pitch, and thank you for your kind words about us, Richard, but it's not a pitch about us. It's more about how do we make sure that we've got that long-term planning, or certainly that 6-month planning that will ensure that money lasts, because we need it to. We need those runways to be extended. So
yeah, and I completely concur with that, Helen, because a lot of the businesses that we're talking to at the moment, as soon as you start to get those forward-looking forecasts in place, they're realising that actually, yeah, that their crunch point isn't now. It's when the government support falls away, they faced with their full overheads coming back online.
Wow,
reduce
exactly.
footfall if they're in a retail situation, you know, and how do they get that cost recovery? And so actually their cash flow crunch is coming October, November time.
Exactly. And you know, runway is something, so in SaaS businesses, obviously when we run our business, we're obsessed with runway. That's how we run, because we run from series investment to, you know, VC raise to VC raise. So runway is something we talk about, but I think we definitely need small businesses to understand that runway. Listen, back to you guys. Back to you, Sandra. I know you're taking the next bit and I will mute.
Okay. So we would like to have an idea of how you are feeling about the future, and to help us and understand what you want to get from the session today and where you are at the moment. I want a little bit of audience participation at this point. So I'm going to launch a poll, and I'd like to know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how you are feeling at the moment, where 1 is you're overwhelmed by the experience of COVID-19, 5 you're neutral, and 10, you know, quite frankly, you're feeling hugely optimistic and looking forward to the future. So we will give you, oh yes, votes coming in very nicely now, thank you. About halfway there now. A few more of you still to go. Now, obviously, I can see these, this poll appearing on my screen. You can't see this. This is a very interesting picture for me. We've got just a few more people. It'd be great if you could put your vote in there. Another 10 or so of you, please, if possible. I'll give you about another 10 seconds. I think we're doing 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 at this point. Okay, I think that's just about everybody. So let's have a launch and let's have a look at the results. So we can see very few of you are feeling energized or enthusiastic or possibly even motivated by what has gone on in the last 3 months. Interestingly, very few of you are also at the opposite end of that scale. So at the moment, you're fairly neutral about it. You're not quite sure about what's going to happen next. That's really useful information for us, and we will be coming back to that later. So neutral in how you're personally feeling.
And I think, you know, the reality with this is that, you know, it's impacted everyone differently. And, you know, certainly from my own experience, also talking to other businesses, you know, at the start of it, there was a certain novelty factor, wasn't there, about using this sort of technology and getting on meetings and doing this sort of thing, and working from home and having a bit more flexibility and everything else. And then as that picture shows, the challenges of balancing working with homeschooling started to kick in, and the interruptions and everything else. And we all found this newfound respect for teachers and their ability to actually teach kids and get them to sit still and do stuff. So, you know, and I think now a lot of people are starting to feel, well, okay, yeah, you know, I was feeling quite energized by it at the beginning, but the fatigue bit's kicking in now. And actually, I'm missing the human contact and the social interaction, and kind of we need a bit of that. And I mean, one business owner I spoke to last week, he was saying, well, my start point, and that's why we're kind of throw this out there, my start point right now is I've got to get my own mojo back. because actually I'm feeling quite drained by the whole experience as well. So, so it's an important start point, isn't it? Just to check in with yourself and just how you're feeling about things.
Just a quick question that just came in from somebody, just kind of a reflection on that, really, to echo what you're saying, is while quite optimistic about using change for benefit, whoever we are in hospitality, weddings, events, whoever we are, we're probably the most impacted. I think there's a typo, but I think that's what she meant, is that it's been most impacted, but still relatively optimistic. Brexit is something that we need to consider from January the 1st too, which I guess is a really fair point. I think I also just want to echo, I think there's a lot of our businesses that we talk to that feel quite engaged because they feel for the first time that they've actually got under the hood of their business. They now need to drive it. But I do think that most of them know more about the business than they ever knew before because they've been forced to. I know as a friend of ours who runs a bar, and he said we were just reordering every week, and he realised that he had a site in Canary Wharf that he was ordering bass to. So he had like an unlimited amount of bass sitting there, and it's like actually suddenly he's got control over those basic elements and can take control. So I think that's where a lot of the energy comes from. And someone asked me if we're recording. We are recording it. I will share it at the end.
So just really picking up on what Richard has said, the key in so much of this is around communication, how people are feeling. So I would also like to know at this point how your teams are feeling. So I'm going to launch another little poll. Sorry, that one. And go to the next one. And we'd like to have an idea of how your team is feeling. You've got multiple choice on this one. So are they concerned about the virus? Are they worried about keeping safe in the workplace? Are they concerned about their jobs? Do they lack the motivation to get back to work? Are they nervous about re-engaging with colleagues, or none of the above? They really can't wait to get back to work. I'll be very interested to see what results we get from this, because some research that's come out recently is saying that 14% of people would prefer to return to an office. 47% would prefer to continue to working from home on 1 to 4 days a week. 40% would prefer to continue working at home every day. So I'm interested to see where your people are sitting on this poll at the moment. We are about 2/3 of the way there. So keep those answers coming in.
I love that you make everyone answer them. I'm impatient. I'm like, oh, that's most of them. I know she's like, get your answers in. We know how many of you are left.
Important. Everyone has a voice in the business doctors world, Helen.
I think this has been a really challenging area for business owners. You know, a lot of the conversation we're having is about how it's challenged them in a leadership role. Of sort of how do they effectively communicate and engage with their people, and especially where, you know, where you've got people working from home or furloughed, keeping in touch with them. You know, the reality is that across teams, some of them have stayed quite actively engaged in communicating and sort of proactively contacting their boss and everything else. And the reality is that some others have gone very silent and quiet through this period. And I think that's now being reflected as people are returning to work. You know, as people are coming off furlough, in the same way the business owner has got to get their mojo back. It's like, well, how do I now fire up the team? How do I get them re-engaged? And it's a real challenge, you know, because some are coming back desperate to kind of crack on and get back into some sort of routine and normality. But others, you know, we've all been affected in different ways. And for some, it's going to take a bit of time to readjust back into a kind of a normal working pattern, if that's how it's going to, you know, pan out. So, so the bottom one of none of the above, can't wait to get back to work. I know that's not resonating with a lot of business owners right now in terms of what they're seeing across some of their teams, but someone
did fairly add, they said these apply to everybody in their team, because actually you can't bulk the team into one, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
It is interesting that again this resonates with what we're hearing, the sort of thing about keeping safe in the workplace, but concerns about jobs being safe. And it will be interesting to see the impact of the measures that were put in place or announced yesterday by Rishi Sunak. So greatest concerns there, safety. Is it job safety, but also personal and well-being safety? So we are going to move on.
That reflects the immediacy, doesn't it? the sort of immediate impact is, well, how can I reopen the business, get things going, get the team back in, and to do it in a safe, secure way and in line with the government advice and everything else. But I also think that business owners' minds are now starting to turn a little bit to, well, yeah, how do I engage them around a new purpose? And certainly, you know, I was talking to a guy who runs a lighting company in the construction sector earlier this week, and he was saying to me, well, look, I just want to get focused in on something exciting. I need to find a really good opportunity in the business that I can get the team around and get them excited about, as a way of firing them up. And that's a lot of what this framework is designed to do, is to say, well, let's take a fresh look at things and identify where there are some opportunities coming out of this and where perhaps the business has shifted a little bit. But what are the things that we can now really sort of go at that's going to sort of give our business a lift and take us on into the next stage of recovery? So we've kind of checked in and sort of found out how you're feeling. We've thought about how the team are feeling. So the sort of final part of that jigsaw is, so what about the business then? How's the business feeling after the last few months? And for many, whether you're business owners or people supporting business owners, you know, it doesn't really matter. In any of our businesses, chances are we've looked at quite a lot of things over the last few months and lifted the lid on a few things. And it may be that we've had to access new finance, whether it be the CBILS or the bounce back loans, and therefore we sort of restructured the business a little bit. Chances are it's given us an opportunity to really sort of self-reflect and focus in on, okay, what actually from our own personal aspirations, what's important, and we're going to jump into that in a minute, but what's really important now for the business. It's definitely challenged us as leaders at a time where we've been feeling the pressure ourselves in our own businesses, and the uncertainty and everything else. We're suddenly put into a position where we've got to provide reassurance and guidance and support to our teams, and lead through that uncertainty. And that requires, you know, a good dose of humility and empathy and authenticity as a leader, which can be quite challenging when you're feeling a bit vulnerable yourself. So, and this is the point that Helen was making. I think it's absolutely right. You know, this has given an opportunity for a lot of businesses to kind of get into the detail of some of their cost base, particularly their fixed costs, you know, that perhaps they haven't visited for a while, you know, because we stay quite focused on pricing and sort of the cost of sales bit, you know, and our sort of, you know, overall sort of gross profitability. But for a lot of businesses I'm talking to, they're going, well, do you know what? I just hadn't realised how much money we were spending on some of this stuff. And so it has given them a real opportunity to identify scope for efficiency, whether it be, do we need all these premises? Do we need all these field salespeople out on the road, you know, spending 2 hours to get to a meeting for a half-hour discussion? Actually, could we do that a bit differently and be a bit more efficient with that? I think there's a definite trend for people looking at sort of internalising some of their sales activity, particularly in the short term, because of just, you know, how accessible and available are people going to be to have face-to-face meetings. A lot of people have obviously sort of adopted and used the technology. And the key thing now is, well, okay, how do we overcome that kind of Zoom fatigue thing and build in some of that sort of human interaction, but equally sort of retain some of these ways of working as just a good, efficient way of working. And for a lot of businesses, it's given them that opportunity by lifting the lid on things to go, actually, where does the value sit in my business? And actually, I mean, this is really pertinent. I was talking to someone yesterday, and she said, look, you know, we've realised how much time and effort we were spending on one of our service areas that really just wasn't giving much value. And not only is that sort of low value, sort of low profitability, but also then you've got the sort of double whammy effect of it's also a huge opportunity cost of how else could you be spending that time. So for them, that's been quite a key revelation, and now sort of sets the business up in a good way going forwards, because they said, well, you know, we need to stop doing some of that stuff. Yeah, and also, you know, your core proposition, the why, you know, why do people buy from you? I think this period has allowed people to connect more directly and more intimately with customers as well. because people have just been sort of checking in on each other. You were forced to have that dialogue because you wanted to understand, well, how are your customers feeling through this, and what's the likely impacts for them as individuals or for their businesses. So yeah, it's giving people an opportunity to really sort of go back and sort of revisit, okay, why do people buy from us? What's the need we fulfill in the market? Enforce innovation. I mean, one of the key things there, I think, is, well, okay, yeah, a lot of businesses have sort of pivoted, to use that cliche term now, but and have adapted and modified the way they do things. But is that a sustainable thing, or actually was it just an in the moment thing? And I think that particularly applies to sort of retail and e-commerce to some extent. And as we reflected yesterday, it's forced us to kind of look at things in more detail, get better understanding of our information, and also how up to date and accurate it is to make informed management decisions, and that's the key thing, really. So we've been using this framework with people just to sort of help as they return to work and as they get the businesses back online, is just to kind of take the opportunity to sort of step back and just appraise some of these things. And we go through this sort of 6R process with people, where it's like, okay, we've got the sort of actual sort of action of returning, that's fine, but what are we returning to? And then this is a real opportunity to renew what we're about as a business, and how we operate, and our values and our culture, and use that as a way of engaging the team. And then to take the opportunity to do a bit of an outward scan of what's happening around us. And we'll take you through some of these steps in a little bit more detail. And then to lift the lid on the business and sort of just internally refresh some of those things about, okay, where do we make money? Where don't we? Has that shifted? And then to kind of start to build a plan to sort of get things moving again, and exploit some of those new opportunities in some cases.
So let's start with returning. I'm sure this curve will be familiar to you. It's been seen around a lot, but it's really, really useful in helping people to understand where they are and what their possible outcomes are. So if we look back to the beginning of the year, this is the Kubler-Ross. Originally it was grief curve, and it's around the emotions that people move through when they are faced with trauma or a crisis. And it starts, over here, beginning of the year, we're all sort of fairly much in, denial that anything's actually going to happen. We're concentrating on Brexit. We've got the election out of the way. We're concentrating on the future, what that may bring. And we're not taking an awful lot of notice of what's going on further afield. But of course, as we worked through the early weeks of this year, we then started hearing reports of cities going into lockdown, and we move into this denial phase. Well, that's not going to happen to us. We'll be fine. More cases start to appear in the UK. Businesses start to slow down. Uncertainty, frustration, and anger very often are the emotions that will be setting in. And as we fall into that, at the bottom of that curve, that frustration and that anger, it interferes with our ability to think and to plan, because of the uncertainty that we find ourselves in. But actually, this is the perfect time to be thinking and planning, because as we come out the other side of this curve, as we're moving through lockdown, as we are now, we need to start to make decisions about the future vision for the business and the plan. Now, the people who have not been able to take the time to think and plan and look to the future are quite likely to struggle going forward in the next 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. The people who are still hibernating their businesses may well come out of this and find that their market has changed so dramatically that it's no longer there. Obviously, pubs and restaurants opened in theory opened last weekend. I think the figures on Monday suggested around 30 to 50% of pubs and restaurants opened. So 30 to 50% of restaurants didn't open last weekend. Some are just waiting to get past the weekend rush. Some are reopening this weekend. But the expectation is that some of them simply won't come through all of this. Their market will have changed. Competitors will have moved into their space. Their client base will have changed dramatically, and they are not going to come through this. what we want to work towards, and the people who we are, you know, engaging most with at the moment are the people who are looking to adapt and to reinvent their business so that they can come through the current crisis, through COVID-19, and out the other side ready to fight through the recession and what will happen to them next. So how do you renew? Richard?
Thank you all. I don't know about others, but through this period, I've sort of found myself kind of revisiting Maslow's hierarchy of needs quite a bit. Because, you know, I don't know if you're sort of familiar with it, but it's basically...
No, I just say, Richard, that question, what I thought you were going to say is I found myself in my rosé fridge or a glass of wine at 3.
Yeah,
not what you actually just said. But, no idea what you just said. The rosé, yes, but no idea to that theory.
Right, okay. Well, Maslow's hierarchy was... he was I don't know, philosopher, I guess, and was very interested in sort of human behaviour and the sort of fundamental needs that we all have as humans. And he came up with this sort of hierarchy of needs, where sort of at the bottom level, it was all about physiological needs. Our basic needs in life need to be met before we can start to sort of move into sort of the broader needs that we have. So shelter, food, reproduction. Yeah. Then in the sort of middle level, you've got more of that sort of sense of belonging stuff. So, you know, human connection, social interaction. And then at the top, he described it as self-actualization, but it was basically a sort of, you know, feeling of self-worth and the ability to learn and grow and develop. And those things are all important. But if you haven't got the basics, then you can't start to answer some of those other things and put those into your life. And for me, yeah, in amongst the craft beer deliveries and the rosé wine and everything else, yeah, I did do that as well. But it has been a thing that's kind of resonated as we've had discussions with people, because, you know, when the pandemic hit, you go straight to the bottom of that hierarchy, and it's all about survival, and it's human survival, and it's business survival as well. And then as we sort of started to see the impacts of that isolation, that social interaction piece is now starting to come back quite strongly. And people are like, you know what, I'm done with this. I need to kind of meet people again. I need to, you know, I need to interact. I've been missing that. In some cases, some people have been saying, you know, I've been going back into face-to-face meetings, albeit distanced, and I've kind of had to relearn how to interact with people properly again. Because I've been used to this sort of slightly truncated world of Zoom and everything else. So I think it's, you know, we're strong believers in values-led businesses and businesses that have a really strong engaged purpose. And I think, you know, the start point of that is what do you want out of life as a business owner? And that may have shifted a bit over the last few months. So check back in with your personal aspirations. As to what you want out of life, because that's your anchor. Because if it's all very well building a strategy plan for the business, but if it doesn't do it for you, then you'll get to a point where you're feeling demotivated and frustrated and everything else, because it's not delivering your needs in life. So we always start there. That's the start point. What are your personal aspirations as an owner? So here's a great opportunity to kind of just check back in with that and reflect back on the last few months. Then start to sort of revisit, well, what's your reason for being as a business? Why do people buy from you? And is that the same as it was 3-4 months ago? Has it shifted a little bit in terms of the need that you fulfill in the market? And then we've become very short-termist, understandably. You know, it's sort of being week by week, day by day. What's Rishi going to announce today? Okay, what does it mean for my business? You know, and all that sort of thing. But actually, it's really important for you, for your own mojo, and for the team around you to start setting some visionary goals again as to kind of where do we see the business now in, okay, it might not be 3 to 5 years time, it might be a year out, but let's put some goals in place that we can all strive towards. And then the final part of this sort of DNA of the business is the values, and it is so important to sort of revisit actually what are the values and behaviours that bring us all together as a group, that determine the way we do business, how our customers feel, and how it feels to work around here, and bring everyone together around that. And I was talking to a business owner end of last week, and unprompted, he said to me, I want to do a session with the team where we bring everyone back together and we just revisit what we're all about. because he said, actually, I think our customers' needs have changed and we need to adapt the way we do things, and our behaviours and what's most important is going to have to shift as well.
Can I ask you a question, Richard, on that one? Because you say, do your customers still want the same things as before? How do you know? How do you find that?
Yeah, and that's the key question, isn't it? Because during this period, it has forced people to talk to their customers more than they would normally. And it's very true, because a lot of businesses end up focusing time and effort on the wrong things, because they think that actually what their customers value most is one thing. But when you're actually going to ask them, it's actually quite often other aspects of the way that you serve them and the way that you do business. So check back in with your customers, understand where they are, how are things returning for them, how's it working for them. Obviously, if you're in a B2C business and it's more sort of consumer led, then it's still important to talk to them, understand kind of where's their head at, and actually have their needs changed. But in a business to business environment, absolutely, just check in and understand how they're doing with their businesses, and use it as an opportunity to sit down and go, right, okay, how can we support you over the next year or so? What is it that you're looking to do? Is there something that we can do to support you with that? And have those more in-depth conversations, because we tend to get a bit reactive and we respond to inbound stuff and we forget to actually go and have those sort of proper meaningful conversations.
So we need to move on to review and how we then start to take things forward from there, and how we start to take a step forward. I'm sure this business model will be familiar to many of you. It's a good old-fashioned step analysis, looking at the external environment. These are all the things that we cannot control. And bizarrely, that's a very familiar thing to us at the moment, things that we cannot control. We've been surrounded by them completely for the last 4 months. But we need to look at where we are now. We need to do a little bit of crystal ball gazing about where we think that's going to take us in the future. And broadly speaking, we break that down into 4 different areas: social, and potentially include with that environmental. And I think the expectation, this is something we could talk about for a day, never mind for an hour. But briefly, I think that some of the key things that we are going to see changing. This week alone, we have seen Next and ASOS announced that they will no longer be stocking Boohoo products because of the concerns around workers' conditions and pay in certain factories. I had a fantastic story a little while ago of a museum on the Sussex-Hampshire border. It's called the Gilbert White Museum, and Gilbert White was he was involved in it's sort of horticulture, that sort of thing, and he had done a study of plants, and they have this museum, but its purpose was around education and sharing all the learning that he had done about plants and wildlife and all these sorts of things. And obviously in March they had to shut down. But they're in a small village where the demographic is predominantly older people, and there is no easy access to supermarkets. And one of the things that the museum discovered, also people very scared to leave the village. They're an older demographic, some were shielded, and they were scared to leave the village. And so they turned the museum cafe and shop into a village store. And they quickly, it was hugely successful. They were turning over £6,000 a week very, very quickly. Take that out to a year, all of a sudden that's £300,000 worth of income for a museum that has struggled to get people through the door. The social impact that they've had on their local community, never mind the economic impact that that can have on their local community, is massive. And so one of the questions that they will have to be asking themselves as they move forward is, do they want to retain their old model, or do they want to stick with the new model that they had adopted or adapted to serve their local community at the time? Because the feeling, I think, is that we are a lot more community minded. Globalisation, we expect, will reduce, though, particularly if we go back to this idea of people wanting to work from home more. What impact is that going to have on the local community and businesses around that? We could talk at length about the impact of technology. We do know that the adoption of technology has come on so much in the last 3 months. It's grown more in the last 3 months than we would have expected it to in 3 years. And we know at the moment that e-commerce, it was already on the up. It has grown more in the last 3 months than it had in the previous 10 years. That's a phenomenal figure. We're creatures of habit, but we adopt crap habit quite quickly. And the expectation is that we will not move away from that habit again. In terms of politics, government has never been so involved in our business as it is. And in terms of the economics, we're moving into recession. We will see higher unemployment. But the flip side of this is, if you are growing a business and if you are recruiting, what difference is that going to make to the availability of labour for you, to your workforce, to your skilled labour force, and what price will you have to pay for this? You need to go through each of these 4 areas and identify in the macro environment, but also how it applies to your business, the impact that it's going to have, the opportunities and the threats that it is going to provide or pose to you. We are going to move forward a little bit more quickly because I've got my eye on my watch even as we speak. So, thinking about the macro environment initially, what may have changed? Bring it back then down into the micro environment to your own business. There are a number of key areas, and we've already talked briefly about some of these, about where things might have changed. Are you talking to your top 10 customers? Are they still the same people who they were 3 or 4 months ago? Are your key relationships in place? Not just with your client base, but also in terms of your supply line. Where is your supply line coming from? Is it still accessible? The expectation is that we will move to much shorter and much faster supply lines than we have in the past. What's happened with your competition? I've been working recently with an architect and started working with him actually pretty much around the beginning of lockdown. Most of our work has been done by Zoom. And one of the things we talked about at length when we first started working together, all of his competitors had furloughed pretty much their whole team. And this was making him quite uneasy. And we talked about, should he be furloughing his team? Should he not? Was he missing out on an opportunity to protect his cash flow by having the government support for his wage bill? But actually what we did instead was we looked at his cash flow forecast. We looked at his order book going forward. And we identified very quickly that if he furloughed his team, he could not service the customers that he had. What's happened? He stayed open. His team have stayed working. What has happened is he has received more inquiries in the 3 months of lockdown than he did in the same period, previous quarter or quarters of last year. And having talked about this, we think it's because his competition weren't there to take the inquiries. The business mix, your distribution channels, are they still there? Again, another client who I work with, he has a network of 50 franchisees around the UK. They provide a magazine, a physical magazine for the parents of primary school age children. It's a what's on, where to go, all the exciting things you need to know to keep your kids entertained, educated and generally in a good place. And their distribution channel was the book bags of schools. Went into the school, put the book, put the magazine in the book bags, children took them home. His distribution channel has gone completely, overnight, just gone. And his network of 50 franchisees, needless to say, went in pretty much into a flat spin. And so we've done a lot of work with them around, we'd already been talking about, should he be moving to digital distribution because of all the things that we know are already happening with e-commerce, with online buying and with digital technology and adoption pre-lockdown. But this gave him an opportunity to talk to his network around new opportunities for them, new ways of increasing their client base beyond their immediate geography that may have been difficult to them before, and to look at completely new distribution channels. It's likely that he's going to have to stick with that. The schools may go back in September, they may not, but he's been able to use the last 3 months to move some of his franchisees who may have been reluctant to adopt change into a position where they can see that actually now it's really necessary for survival. Margins and profits, we cannot ever speak too much and too long about margins and profits and looking at what's changed. I went out for dinner the other night, you know, generally not news, but this was the first time I'd been out for dinner for 4 months, so it was great news in my house. And one of the first things that you're aware of when you go into the pub that you're eating in, hand sanitizers, everybody in their full masks, which feels perfectly normal now. 4 months ago, that would have been a slightly weird experience, but this now felt perfectly normal. But what's the cost of PPE? What's the cost of protecting your client base if you need to? If your supply line has changed, what impact is that going to have on your margins? You know, are you using Futurely products to help you understand all of this? Is your product and service mix still fit for purpose? Do your clients still want the goods and services and products that you offer? Have their needs changed? And again, the food, the supply chain. Are you talking? Are you communicating? Are you asking people questions? I think all the way through the last few months, and really in all that we do, for business doctors, there are three things that we talk to people about: cash flow, communication, whether that's with your teams, your suppliers, and then most importantly, your clients. And again, in all of this, you have to be asking people what's changed and finding out whether or not your business is still fit for purpose.
Quick question. Sorry, Sandra, I promise it's coming. So it's not a question, it's from Andrew. Hello, Andrew. But he said a client of his had a record level of revenue and profits during COVID because 1, they stayed open and continued to promote through Google adverts, etc. 2, their market has seen record level of searches. And I've heard that, by the way, digital agencies have never been as busy as they are. We all need to get online. 3, with competition turning off marketing, pay-per-click has come down by 33%. So there are far more leads at a much cheaper price, which of course offsets any margins, etc. Which I think is, you know, digital. I was talking to digital agency yesterday. If you're not online, get online. Even if you're just bidding against your competitors, get online. You need pay-per-click campaigns because it is where everybody is. But anyway, thank you, Andrew.
The only thing I'd add to that is I think there's a really important step in all of that to say, you know, what's happening now and what's going to happen in the future. Because I mean, I was talking to a retail company that moved to do home delivery and sort of meal boxes at home, and they've got a sort of network of stores across the UK, and they all had to close, and they moved really quickly, switched to e-commerce, couldn't believe the uptake. You know, it just blew them away, and they've been absolutely flat out trying to fulfil that. But we were chatting yesterday, going, well, yeah, but you've had a very captive market, right? Who are bored at home, wanting to do stuff with the family and need a treat to give themselves a bit of a pickup. So, you know, and that then was borne out in some of the research that we were doing, where they're saying, like, this mealbox thing, okay, it's been a bit of a phenomenon, and Gusto and HelloFresh and all these people have done very well out of it, but it ain't going to stay that way. So, you know, so you're going to have to work harder in that channel to keep it relevant and sort of get that traction. So I think, you know, it's a really important one, is that, yes, you know, this is all about searching opportunities. You know, we've had enough of the sort of doom and gloom and everything else. It's now, right, okay, let's get things moving again. Let's take a fresh look at things. Let's have a really open mind and search for the opportunities. But let's not get complacent that those opportunities that we've seen are going to kind of necessarily stay that way for a while. So it's all about that sort of, how do we adapt and change, but the key thing is that look ahead, isn't it? Look forward, anticipate.
I'm going to move us on because I've still got one eye on that watch that's sitting here beside me. So Richard, if you could talk a little bit for us about in terms of how the advice that you're giving to your clients about how to revive.
Yes, we're going through a process. We're basically saying, let's reset things. Let's check in with what we're about as a business and what we stand for, and what, you know, our position in the market. Let's look at what's going on around us and take stock of that, and saying, okay, we might not be in control of that, but, you know, let's anticipate and see what we can do in terms of mitigation, and is there some opportunities there? And then we've kind of lifted the lid on the business and said, let's look at all the different dimensions of the business. So the next step is, okay, so we might have captured some kind of quite useful opportunities in all of that. So we now need to kind of have a good old look at our internal capability and say, how well positioned are we as a business to be able to exploit these opportunities that we're identifying, and to and to adapt to the things that have changed in the environment that we're working in, and and the way that we do things, and perhaps sort of introduce new products and services. So we just use this sort of GIVE framework as okay, well, let's start by focusing on what are we great at? What are the things that we're really, really good at that are still very, very relevant right now? And how do we play to strengths? How do we do more of that? Because I don't know about you, I mean, I've always been frustrated with sort of, when you're sort of, big businesses and everything, and you sit down and have your appraisal, you have your one-to-one appraisal, and they always focus on the stuff you're not very good at. And say, well, yeah, you need to improve in these areas. And I've always sort of been one that says, well, actually, what about the stuff that I am really good at? Why don't you just get me to do more of that and help other people? And I think it goes to the same for the business. Sort of, we sometimes overlook the stuff that we're really great at, and actually let's focus in on that and say, right, as a team, how do we do more of that? And then once we sort of captured that, it's then like, okay, well, certain things will have changed. Maybe that we do have to improve our digital capabilities within the business. So what are the key improvements that we need to make? So this is starting to get us through into a bit of sort of action planning for going forwards. And where might we be vulnerable? Okay, so it's certainly exposed some vulnerabilities over the last few months. Some of it will be short term, some of it might have actually thrown up some stuff that some key dependencies. And supply chain's a key one. I was talking to one business where it really exposed the fact that they were overly dependent on one supplier. They brought goods in from Eastern Europe. The supply chain got disrupted. But also when they started talking to that supplier and started to look at their business and their accounts, they realized that they were really, really important customer to them. So you have this sort of massive dependency both ways. And so their response now is to develop their own production facility. And also to look at the sourcing for other products and just distribute that risk. So it's definitely one to have a look at. Is the vulnerabilities tend to fall in three areas. It's sort of an over dependency on customer. So does one customer make up more than 15% of your revenue? An over dependency on a supplier, and an over dependency on one key member of staff. And I think all the time we have to kind of be mindful of those things and say, how do we dilute that risk in the business? And then ultimately you're taking a good step back and going, well, okay, so what makes us different and what makes us better in this new world? What is it that's going to set us apart from the crowd and give us a sustainable competitive advantage? And one way to look at that is we've got a, can you flick it on, Sandra, to the next one? Yeah, so we've got this triangle that we use quite a lot with people, and it's just, it's how do we position ourselves to have a sustainable competitive advantage? And there's three key ways you can do that, really. One is that you can have a cost focus, so i.e. your cost base, you're able to flex and adapt more quickly than others, or you might have economies of scale in your business, which means that you can maintain margins by flexing your cost. And some businesses do that through, what they call their sort of vertical integration, so they have sort of complete control and ownership over a lot of their supply chain and things like that. But when we tend to be sort of working with small businesses, and generally speaking, there's not many small businesses that have a cost focus because of that economies of scale thing. So it's more about saying, well, okay, what's our point of differentiation, or is there, have we been able to carve out a niche? Are we the go-to company within a certain geography or within a certain sector? Have we got that kind of vertical specialism, maybe? And just really revisiting this, because if we're not really clear that we're positioned at one of those corners, then we end up in the middle ground, which is not a fun place to be, because that's where it's a chase to the bottom line, where the only thing you've got left to compete on is price. And this, again, is that really important point to say, well, let's not kid ourselves in terms of our value proposition. When we talk to a lot of businesses and we say, okay, what makes you different? They say, oh, it's our customer service. It's like, well, what about it? Let's peel that back a little bit. What is it specifically? And are you sure about that? Is that definitely what your customers value most about what you do? When did you last ask them? It's going back to that sort of thing again. Well, yeah, no, we do, yeah. So it's sort of, define what you think it is, but then go and sense check it. Go and talk to your customers. Say, is this really what you value? Why? What brought you to us in the first place? What keeps you with us, and what's going to keep you with us in terms of what we do? Yeah.
So we need to regenerate. How do we do that? In terms of the strategic options, the questions that we are talking to people out, the questions that we're asking them is, how significant is the impact of COVID-19 on your industry, customers, suppliers, and how long do you think it will take for your revenues to return? So we're using, you know, a very simple matrix. This is a McKinsey matrix. It's actually based on the Ansoff matrix, the Boston Consulting Group matrix. I'm sure you will all have seen this many, many times. Along the bottom, we have the estimated length of time for revenue to return to normal. And on the left-hand axis, we have the level of impact of COVID-19 on your industry or company. So if there is a limited long-term impact and a quick return to pre-COVID revenues, you are likely to be able to emerge quite quickly. Probably a good example of this is hairdressers or barbers. I don't know, anybody else queuing up to get back there just as soon as they can? The only possible exception to this could be geographic. So, for example, Canary Wharf, like in London Docklands, normally about 120,000 people there every day working. At the moment, there is 7,000 people. The impact on the businesses that support those 120,000 people will include cafes, retail, and hairdressers. If you're a hairdresser in Docklands at the moment, you know, there could be, you know, maybe that's the place we all need to go.
One of our bounce back webinars is 640 East, who actually are Canary Wharf based. They're a pop-up down there. So if any of you want to listen to that story of how they're going to try and do it, now they've decided to reopen for the 7,000 that are there, so that back to the early points that you were both making, that they're there, and the competitors have decided not to open. They're like, we're going to stay here, we're going to stay for our brand, we're going to be part of it, and we've worked out the staffing levels. They've been through the process you talked about, but we kind of made that's our point of difference, that we're here, so that we become that first port of call when you do get back. So it's very relevant. But anyway, you can listen to that one. It's on our website. And
there is a whole discussion there about go a little bit further than Canary Wharf and you have a whole new market. You know, just go up the road to Stratford where you have all those really high-end, beautiful flats. It's an easy journey down into Docklands where people would not previously have gone because it would have been too busy. Different way of looking at things. So you think that there will be a limited long-term impact, but the revenues are going to take longer to return okay, a very good example we've just talked about is the local restaurant. You know, again, we've seen some really, really interesting examples of people restructuring their business to ensure that they survive. One of the really great one that I saw was a restaurant that had not only moved to a delivery service, they did the extension of that, but they then said, but if you're one of those people who doesn't like to just, you know, feel the food is being brought in and made for you, if you're one of those people who wants to cook for yourself, what we'll do is we'll print our menus on a day-by-day basis. You can choose which of our meals you would like to cook. We'll deliver the ingredients to you, and we'll do the online tutorial with our chef on how you cook it. What a great way of keeping yourself and your customers, you know, profile and awareness firmly there, but also, you know, looking at alternative revenue streams that you can use. If you are expecting significant long-term impact on your business, but when that is done for the revenues to return quite quickly, maybe you will need to adapt your business rather than restructure. We have seen so many examples of adaptation and you know, from the wonderful Brighton Gin, you interviewed Kathy Caton a couple of weeks ago, completely changing their business from a gin distillery into a hand sanitizer production line, which you know, was successful in so many ways that they weren't just keeping their business solvent and their staff employed, but they were also going out and reaching the local community by sharing some of the products that they made free of charge. Again, where you sit in this is very interesting. If you are a tour operator, we're starting to see, you know, green growth recovery for some elements of the travel industry with the travel corridors being opened up. But again, there will be people within this industry who are going to need to adapt. If I was running a travel agency that brought all the English language students over to Brighton every summer, I would be looking long and hard at how long it's going to take my business to recover. A friend of mine who runs a travel agency in the town. They specialise in the Southeast Asian market, responsible travel, sustainable travel. He is planning on it taking it until next June for his business to come back. He doesn't think there will be sufficient consumer confidence in long haul travel until that length of time. And finally, do you need to completely reinvent your business model and your approach if you think there is going to be a significant long-term impact and revenues taking a long time to return to normal? The example we've used here is business-focused hotels, but I think actually it may also be very relevant to commercial properties. We are seeing companies, Fujitsu have announced that they will offer permanent working from home to their workers. Twitter did the same back in May. And I'm seeing an awful lot of conversation about what will be the impact on this longer term. And will these buildings that no longer house workers, will there be planning permission given for change of use? Generally, that's something that takes a very long time. But if you look at what's being said in the media at the moment, it's expected that that process will be speeded up and that it will have an ongoing impact then for the housing market, stamp duty announcements yesterday, and also the construction industry and how that will impact on them. So look at where you sit on that model, where you think you are on that model. And just to give us an idea of that, we're going to launch another poll just to check that you are.
Just while you get the poll, I'm going to say for the accountants on this, I mean, I think every small business should work out where they sit in this. I think it's in an invaluable chart because I think it will then start to answer the earlier ones that you did. For me, I would start here and think, actually, where the holy Lord are we? And then start to think, right, if we are restructuring, what are our challenges, etc. But I think if you're an accountant who's on this session, this is the one to go through with every single one of your clients and actually identify whether there are 1, 2, 3 or 4. And then you advise accordingly, which I know is what you guys do.
Absolutely, yeah. So, where are we going? Votes are coming in. It's like being on some sort of reality TV show. The votes are coming in fast now, Helen. You can't see these little screens changing in the way that I can, but it's absolutely fascinating. And yes, as Helen says, if you are business advisors rather than business owners, think about this from the point of view of where your clients may be sitting on this matrix, as opposed to where you sit on this matrix. I've got to say, I found this one of the most interesting, when I'm posing this question to my clients, where do you see yourself sitting on this? It really, really, really makes them think about where they see their future going and where they want their future to go.
Also think it's a reality check, possibly, sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
I think you've got everyone there, Sandra.
Yeah. So, what are we all saying? Okay. That's a very positive result. That's a very
the economy's going to be fine.
Yeah. It does kind of invite the question, are you sure?
Well, yeah, probably another conversation there in itself.
It is, isn't it? It's sort of, can we just come back, pick up where we left off, move on? Is everything going to return to some sense of normality? I think, you've got a third of people there, haven't you? They're saying, look, we are going to have to adapt in some way, and then small amounts in terms of restructure and reinvent, because that tends to be some more radical impacts. But for the people in the emerge, I think it's just that, take that moment, step back, and just sort of reflect on, okay, are we sure about this? Has anything changed? It might be small adaptations, but are there things that we do need to do differently?
But
every business, just a quick question there's a few questions coming in which I'll go through in a second, but genuinely, do you think every business fits into this, or is there a case of actually it's closed doors, it's not going to survive? Or do you genuinely believe that every business, even if they end up at number 4, that there is a route to move forward?
I think that depends on mindset, and I think it depends on personal vision. I have had one of my clients since lockdown say to me, the adaptations that I need to make to my business to go forward, I haven't got the stomach for. I want out. One person. The rest of them have all engaged with it, but there will be a number of people, for whatever reason, and it may be personal reasons, who simply say, I don't want to do this anymore. I've had enough. Then it turns into mindset and planning and vision as to whether or not you will be able to restructure, adapt, or reinvent yourself.
I think it's actually interesting as well. You've got to go the other way. Those that have boomed, which way do they come back down? It kind of needs to be flipped for those, because as you did say before, there are those home deliveries who are booming. Where do they end up back if you did reverse this? Couple of quick questions. So Mark, hello Mark. Some businesses may well cross all quadrants, which I think is probably a really fair point. And again, I guess thinking as their advisor, how you work with them to tackle moving them into the quadrant where they move their way forward. Amar has said though, is there not a risk that at the moment it feels like we're emerging and we've restructured? I guess especially as people have got money in the bank with the bounce backs, etc. But actually we've got no idea what the long term is going to feel like. So this may well vary.
Go back to the step analysis. Go back to the step analysis. Go back to the give analysis, and ask all the questions to make sure that really is true.
And I think, you know, whilst we're obviously presenting this at a point in time, you know, these sort of processes, this thinking, it's not just to do it once and then it's done.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, it needs, any sort of strategic plan for a business needs to be a continual living, breathing thing that you're referring back to. And you won't have control of everything, and you won't be able to predict everything. But the important thing is that you're taking the time to sort of anticipate what might happen, ask those what ifs, and start to plan for that. Then absolutely revisit and go, well, okay, did it map out in that way or not? And I think, the comment about actually you might be sort of navigating through a number of these quadrants is absolutely right, because there's a time dimension, isn't there? And there's a sort of a difficulty factor of like what's involved in being able to.
Agree. Sandra, can you just stay on it? As I suspected, this is the popular slide because it's a good model, and I know time is pressing. Those of you that do have to go to the hour, it is recorded. You could always pick it up from this point, but it's so popular this, because I think people get this, and I would argue with both of you that I think this is what you need to do first and then go and do all the steps, because I think this genuinely just makes so much sense and it just kind of sets it clear in your mind. But a business owner, so Yaron's gone, and he said, we have difficulty in seeing where we sit. Our main industry is weddings and events, and it's been left in limbo. On the whole, most of us in the industry would have been in the emerge and adapt and acted as such from April. However, recently we've had to drop into restructure and reinvent as regulations keep changing, and we are faced with ongoing campaigns around refunds. I guess what do you do with businesses like that just go, well, actually, where on earth are we day to day? And I know you said you've got to keep doing it, but where do they start?
Yeah, and I think sometimes there's a real seasonality impact, isn't there, as well? I mean, Sandra mentioned the sort of education sector, and, you know, I've been working with a business that, you know, English language school, where she's obviously been significantly impacted. And similar, I guess, with the sort of wedding market, you know, where you might be quite heavily dependent on the sort of summer peak period. For the overall performance of the business through the year, and it's the same with that sort of summer school sort of education market. And for her, it's absolutely, things probably aren't going to return until next summer. But she's starting to think about, well, actually, how do I reduce this seasonality dependency in my business? Yes, okay, right now it's survival. How do I get through to next summer? That's sort of immediate front of mind concern. But the other thing in terms of adapting, reinventing a little bit, is to say, well, actually, what this has done is made me realise how dependent I am on that period. And actually, as a business, I've got capabilities in other areas that, you know, for her, she's got great capabilities in recruiting teachers. So it's
tackling individual businesses and their individual stance. Amar's just followed up again. So he was the guy who said, we don't know, we're in emerging, but we don't know what lies ahead. He just put as a follow-up, I actually mean from a retail perspective, as the world has been locked up, they've come back in throngs in terms of buying, but will that sustain once the initial upward curve is done? How do you predict that? How are we meant to predict that?
Yeah, and I think in the same way that at the start of this process, we couldn't predict everything, but we could model different scenarios.
I'm a massive fan of that.
I knew you would be. But it's the thing, isn't it? Because if you model it and go, well, okay, it probably won't be sustained because there's an immediate relief factor going on, and everyone's like, hey, thank goodness, and go out and buy stuff again. And, you know, but okay, so let's take that and then go, well, okay, let's ratchet that down by 20%. What does that look like?
Well, I actually think we've got to approach it not like I think, you know, we're never going to return to the normal world. I think we almost need to, now we're out of lockdown, every day is almost unveiling, like say what you see. It's unveiling a little piece of what the future looks like day by day. And I don't think we can try and pinpoint it to what we've seen before, which I think is what a lot of people have made mistakes, especially when forecasting. It's okay, this is a busy month for us. We will pick up in September. We haven't got any of that relevance, I don't think, and it's almost day to day. What's happened? How does that impact where we think we're going? What does that affect? How does that affect our predictions? And it is working closer than ever on a day-to-day basis, I think, on your business, and actually starting to model it based on the trends that you're seeing today and this week, not trends in previous periods. There's still questions. Daisy very quickly said, I've got a load of people in that I'm going to jack it in as I don't have the heart to reinvent and adapt group. As I don't have the heart to reinvent and adapt group. Oh, well, that's a sad story. Martin says, fifth possibility, what about abandon and cut losses? That was kind of my point. I wonder whether that should be, because not everybody's going to make it through, and actually you could spend money on inefficient businesses that weren't going to make it anyway. And actually,
and I think that comes to the level of risk, the investment that's required to do that change, how long it's going to take, and it just goes all the way back to the personal aspirations of the owner, which is coming out here, you know. And actually, you know, if it's time to call it a day on that one, hey, you know, you're a great person, great entrepreneur, go and do something amazing somewhere else.
Completely. Sandra, I will let
Some
you
ways actually is reinventing yourself, which sort of puts you back into number 4 then. It's an interesting one.
I guess. I will let you go to your next slide, Sandra. Go.
I'm mindful. I've got one eye on the watch. I'm mindful. So, let's keep this short. Let's keep this one snappy. Ultimately, you need your vision. You need your plan. You have to understand your purpose so that you can then lead and engage your team. Through that, reorganize, look at your sales, your marketing, your operational functions, how they all have to come together to feed into the big picture business objectives. Put in place the action plan, put in place the milestones, put in place the key performance indicators against which you are going to measure your success. Use the Futurely products to do some what if planning, some scenario planning about what will this look like if I do this, if I do that, if I do, so, you know, plan C, A, B or C, whichever one I go for. But ultimately, this is the journey that people, I think, are on at the moment. You know, we're returning, we're renewing, we need to review, refresh, revive, regenerate. Richard, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, I think obviously that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of stuff. We've covered a lot in there, and as Sandra said earlier, you know, we can spend a lot more time on just individual elements.
We can spend days talking about this stuff.
Yeah, and you know, but I think there is this thing of when so much is changing, it can lead you to a position where you're sort of saying, well, I can't plan for it because there's just too much uncertainty. And, you know, and I think it is that thing, you go back to that sort of statement, and you know, the only thing that's certain is change, or whatever it was. And, you know, and it's always going to be there. And actually, as human beings, we crave purpose. So actually, if you're going to get your mojo back, if you're going to get your team around you, if you're going to get them re-engaged, then we have to get some sort of plan together. And it's accepting that we don't have all the answers and we're not going to be able to predict everything. But we will, through this process of taking stock of things, looking at what's going on around us, identifying where there might be some opportunities that we can really go for, to just start to get a plan around that, because that then creates a purpose that you can engage your team on and you can drive forwards. I mean, this was a bit of a sort of just show and tell today of some of the stuff that we've just been working with. So frameworks, resources, we've got a host of other things that we've just opened up for people over the last few months, because there's tools and resources that we use that actually we realise would probably be quite helpful right now. So starting with the Futurely platform that we use with people, we opened that up for free because it was just like, come on, you know, we can help you through this period. But we've got things around how to engage your teams, how to manage your HR processes really effectively, and sort of keep all your people stuff in one place, project planning templates, anything else. So So we're making those available to people at the moment because it's just that, you know, we're all in this, and you know, and if those things help, that's great. I think the other thing to say is, look, you know, if any of this has resonated with people and you want to get a smaller group together of business owners or maybe the accountants out there, you know, if you want to run a session with your clients, we're more than happy to help facilitate that and support that, and share all the resources that we're using to do that. And, you know, because typically we're doing some of this as a sort of half-day workshop, where it's much more interactive and there's a workbook and people are able to sort of engage with each other on the call and things like that. So,
and we can get into the nitty-gritty of some of the questions that we've really just been able to, you know, pick at the surface. You know, the step analysis, the give analysis of just so useful in a group environment where you can use people as sounding boards to bounce ideas off one another.
Well, I think, you know, from the accountants, I think it'd be incredibly valuable for that day if they group by vertical, because I think those verticals have got the same challenges, you know, as we talk about the wedding venues, for example. Then they can share ideas, you can share your experience, you know, and that's, I think, could be a really effective way of making this work. I will make sure all your contact details are on the email that I do send out.
And equally, if anyone wants just a sort of one-to-one follow-up and there's something's resonating, they just want to chat it through, you know, we're available online. We can have a virtual coffee and a chat and an answer.
Perfect. Is that the end of the slides? Super.
That's it.
Love it. Listen, we didn't go too far over, team, and we weren't too far considering I promised I wouldn't speak and then spoke, you know, and I said to Sandra, I won't speak at all. Look, that was incredibly valuable. I really love some, as you know, really love some of those models, and I genuinely think that they could be incredibly valuable for businesses and accountants. We will share this slide deck. We will share the contact details. If anybody else wants anything from Business Doctors, they do work with accountants and small businesses. I really want to stress that because I know a load of my accountants are on the call. So look, if you're looking to try to do more of that deep advisory, which is beyond just looking at cash flow, which I think advisory is more than cash flow, then do reach out to them. And small businesses, you're not on your own. Business Doctors absolutely will help. So Sandra, Richard, brilliant session. The messages coming in I've had, that was gold. This is brilliant. So look, absolute heads up. Well done, both of you. Thank you for spending an hour with us. Go and enjoy the rest of your days. Everyone stay safe, and please can the sun come out this weekend.
Thank you, Helen, for inviting us to do this.
Thank
It's been a real pleasure.
That was thoroughly brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Take care,
Have a lovely day, everyone.
Thank you.
All the best.